Yeah, Hice, I'm sorry.
I now recognize Mr. Hice for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Rolando, it is true that the Postal Service is not supposed to be involved in political campaigns, correct? Other than delivering mail. And yet the Office of Special Counsel found systematic violations of the Hatch Act in 2016 with the Letter Carriers Labor 2016 initiative. Are you familiar with that report and the violations?
Somewhat familiar with what the issue they had with the Postal Service, yes.
You ought to be very familiar with it. And just out of curiosity, were there any letter carriers requesting to campaign for Donald Trump during that time?
I don't know.
Had they come forward to campaign, have leave of absence, would you have forced management to grant Trump supporters a leave of absence to campaign for him?
That wouldn't have been my decision, Congressman.
Whose decision would that be?
It would have been the Postal Service if they're requesting leave to do anything.
Well, I mean, who at the Postal Service?
Their supervisor.
All right, well, there was a concerted effort across the board for political activity in behalf of Hillary Clinton, and I'm just curious how that happened and the violations. Were there any consequences for the violations of the Hatch Act?
Not that I'm aware of, because there weren't any violations by letter carriers.
There most certainly were.
Well, not what the report said, sir.
Well, the report makes it clear that there were systematic violations.
Not by letter carriers.
Who were the violations committed by?
I believe they were directed at the Postal Service.
Well, I mean, aren't letter carriers the ones that took a leave of absence?
They are the employees of the Postal Service.
And they were the ones who took a leave of absence for 2 months to campaign.
They were the ones that had their requests for leave approved by the Postal Service.
And their request was approved, and they campaigned for 2 months, had a leave of absence for 2 months, kept their job, came back. So I'm curious if there were any consequences to that.
To who, sir? To the letter
To
carriers?
those who were responsible. For crying out loud, this is not a complicated question.
Oh, it is. It actually is a complicated question.
The Hatch Act was violated. I'm curious, those who were guilty of violating it, were there any consequences?
You'd have to ask the Postal Service, because I believe those...
Well, obviously, because I'm not going to get any answers from you.
Well, it didn't
Ms.
involve my
Brennan, let me
members.
go to you, Ms. Brennan. You told this committee back in 2016 at the front end of the 5-year plan that you had identified some $5 billion in cost reductions, which was a good thing, but I'm curious if that strategy that you mentioned in 2016 has been implemented.
In part, Congressman, and what we're focused on looking out is a 10-year plan that would address the USO and address pricing and product flexibility, giving the Postal Service the opportunity to better compete in an increasingly competitive environment.
So the plan that you mentioned 4 years ago has not been fully implemented?
All the savings have not been achieved.
Okay. You also mentioned in February 2017, 2 years ago, you assured me personally that the issue of replacing aging vehicles was going to occur in any month. You said the award would be granted in a matter of months. That never took place, did it?
Congressman, if we were talking about the next generation delivery program, that is a multi-year research, development, and testing program that we just completed the testing actually in March.
All right, so there was not an award, a contract award for it.
You may have been talking about the contract award, or we may have been discussing the contract award for the prototypes.
But that was never done.
Yes, it was.
It was done?
Yes.
All right, so where do we stand now on aging vehicles?
Yeah, and we just completed the prototype testing in March. So we are currently analyzing the results of the testing that was done over a multi-month period in different topographies, different climates, and those results will help inform the production requirements going forward.
Okay, I'd love to explore this further. My time is running out. Mr. Edwards, let me end with you. You brought up some interesting points a while ago. The post office is running out of money. Ms. Brennan mentioned 2024. I don't know if it'll go that long or not, but if the Postal Service were a private company, what changes would immediately be taking place to make it solvent?
Gentleman's time has expired, but you may answer the question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I mentioned some cost cutting, like closing post offices, cutting labor costs, that sort of thing. One thing I did want to mention about the retiree health care, the vast majority of private companies do not even offer private health care. And even if we move that entire burden over to, say, Medicare, to taxpayers today, there's more than $3 billion every year of new health care costs accruing from current employees. So you could move the cost over to taxpayers now. It doesn't solve the problem. These costs keep accruing and accruing. There's kind of a death spiral going on here.
Mr. Norton.